maybe the street cleaners will have been finished by then. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Concordia University's Fourth Space. Thank you so much for joining us for today's event. How are we aging with artificial intelligence? And this is an AI and Aging Summit. We'd like to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands in Sawchuk, Montreal. We respect the continued connections with the past, the present, and the future, and our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. And here at Fourth Space, we work with our university community to help mobilize knowledge. We co-create daily activities that examine research questions and projects in development across the university. Now, today's event, we're running it as a live stream, both to YouTube as well as a Zoom meeting. So those of you joining us there, if you have any comments or questions, just pop those into the chat, and we'll do our best to read those out a little bit later on during the Q&A. And for those of you here in the space with us, similar idea, if you have a comment or question, if you just raise your hand, we can run a microphone around so that everyone can hear what's happening. Okay, with that, it's very much my pleasure to pass the microphone to one of the co-organizers of today's event, as well as Assistant Professor in Political Science, Dr. Rachel Weldrick. It's great to have you.
Is this loud enough into the mic? Perfect. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm really delighted to welcome you to the Fourth Space today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for what I hope will be a really thoughtful and creative day together. My name is Rachel. I'm an assistant professor in political science here at Concordia, and I'm one of the co-conveners of today's event. And I've been participating and attending in the AI and Aging working group that's been running throughout the year here at the university. And the purpose of today's event is quite simple, I think, but I also think it's really important. We wanted to bring people together in one room to think about the intersections of aging and artificial intelligence. AI is being discussed everywhere right now, in universities, in the media, in workplaces, in policy discussions, in healthcare, in community. And at the same time, our aging shapes all of our lives, all of our families, our communities, and yet these conversations aren't always happening together. This piece about aging, this piece about artificial intelligence. So today is an invitation to bring these pieces together, to ask, what does AI mean in the context of aging? What might make it possible? What should we be cautious about? Who benefits? Who might be left out? What kinds of futures are being imagined for us with AI? And what kinds of futures might we want to imagine together? So one of the things I'm most excited about today is the mix of people in the room. We have people bringing scholarly expertise, professional expertise, community knowledge, lived experience, technical knowledge, policy perspectives, and creative perspectives. The mix of people in this room, I think, is the whole point of the day. And so this is not meant to be a day where one type of expertise dominates the conversation, not at all. It's not meant to be a day where only people who work directly with AI get to speak about AI, or only people who study aging get to speak about aging. Instead, we are hoping to create a space where different kinds of knowledge can sit alongside one another. So whether you're here as a researcher, a student, a community member, practitioner, or simply someone who is curious about these questions, your perspective is welcome here today. All of these perspectives are valid, and I hope people feel very free to ask questions, suggest ideas, make connections, and think aloud. I want to say from the beginning that we do not expect anyone to have all of the answers today. In fact, I think the most interesting parts of the day will probably come from the questions that we do not yet know how to answer. AI can sometimes be presented as something inevitable, abstract, technical, as if it is something that simply arrives and that the rest of us have to adapt to. But today gives us an opportunity to slow down that conversation a little bit, to think about AI not only as a technology, but as something social, relational, ethical, political, and human. When we think about AI and aging together, we're not just talking about devices, platforms, tools, or systems. We're also talking about care, autonomy, dignity, access, community. We're talking about how people live, how people age, how people are supported, and how people participate in the worlds around them. And that is why it matters today that we have so many different people in the room. These questions cannot be answered well from one discipline or one perspective alone. I want to emphasize, though, that while these are serious questions, today should not feel heavy or shouldn't feel like work. We really want this day to feel friendly and creative and energizing, a day where we can all come together to talk across different perspectives and maybe have some fun with some big ideas. So please treat today as an opportunity to be curious, ask questions, offer ideas, even if they feel unfinished. So before I say a little bit more about the structure of the day, I want to offer some important thanks and share the microphone with some important people in the room. So first, I want to acknowledge that today's event is hosted and organized by the Engage Center for Research on Aging here at Concordia and has been made possible due to the financial support from the Applied AI Institute at Concordia. We're really grateful for their support. And so with that, I'm going to briefly pass the microphone to Eric Craven, coordinator at Engage, to say a few words about what Engage is.
Thank you, Rachel. That's you really covered so well all the spirit of what this has been like. I'm Eric Craven. I'm the coordinator for Engage Center for Research on Aging. The intern director, Emily Coffey, is away in Belgium on research, but we do have former director Kim Sawchuk here, so thank you for that. Engage is an exciting research hub at Concordia. It invites researchers from all areas who have aging in their world of research to connect with us. We have a rich network of local, national, international partners and work extensively with local community groups in Montreal. One of the things we really like to do is create spaces for genuine exchange between the research and the older adults themselves and have it all at Concordia. This working group has been an amazing opportunity to learn about all kinds of things going on at Concordia. So that's all I needed to say. If you want to know more about Engage, we have some postcards at the back. You can sign up for a newsletter. I would love it if you did that. We also have name tags at the back too if people want to do that. And I will pass the mic to Sawchuk Aroja from the co-director of the Applied AI Institute. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Sawchuk Ahuja. I'm the newly appointed, as of 3 months ago, co-director of the Applied AI Institute at Concordia University. I'm also an associate professor in digital innovation and transformation at the John Molson School of Business. So it's a pleasure to see everybody here. Welcome to the panelists and the audience. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about what we do at the Applied AI Institute. And so it's part of our mandate is to have conversations like this and support working groups like this that are working on cutting edge and really relevant topics such as AI and aging. So it's great to see all the work, the collaborations with Engage, and the conversations that it has fostered. So part of our mandate is to support groups like this that are interdisciplinary, that improve the status quo, that bring the community into conversations, and that really develop knowledge that we can then mobilize around important conversations that need to be had to influence policy and make and improve the technology and the impact of innovations for all of us, not just a part of society that might be familiar with technology. So with that, thank you to everybody that has worked hard on the working group. Thank you to the team at AI2, especially Lindsay, who puts in the effort to bring us all together to share knowledge and discuss these ideas. I would like to say thank you for the opportunity to bring me in and welcome you all to the panel and to the event. So with that, have a great panel. Thank you so much. I'll pass it back to Richard. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So before we dive into the panel, I just want to say a few more words of thanks. So today's event really has been made possible by the Engage Center for Research on Aging. They're our host organization for today. But of course, behind the scenes, we'd also like to thank the important work of the folks at the ACT Lab and the Aging and Data Project. And I want to thank the members of the Aging and AI Working Group that we've mentioned a few times now. This event today is really growing out of a series of conversations and events that we've been hosting throughout the year. And in many ways, today is a continuation and a coming together of the work that's happened throughout the year. The working group has helped create a space where people from different backgrounds can think together about the relationships between aging, data, technology, care, and the future. And today builds directly from that shared energy and curiosity. I'd also like to thank our co-convener, Dr. Kim Sawchuk, who's here in the audience with us today, for all of her work in convening this working group and bringing the event to life. We'd also like to thank Eric Craven from Engage, who you just heard from, as well as Scott DeJong, who's somewhere in here, who has been working tirelessly for months to make this entire working group and event happen. So huge thanks to those two people. So in terms of a little schedule of events, just so you know what to expect, we're going to begin with a panel, as you can see, that's going to bring together some different perspectives on AI. And by the way, none of us up here have a lot of the answers. We're going to be kind of mulling over these pieces together. After the panel, we will break for lunch, which will give everyone a chance to continue conversations informally and explore some of the posters that we'll have on display that have been submitted ahead of time. In the afternoon, we'll move into a World Cafe activity. And this will be a collaborative kind of brainstorming activity where we can really put our heads together and think about what the future of AI and aging might look like across a number of different thematic areas. The goal is not to come up with one perfect answer or a single shared position. Instead, it's to generate ideas, surface questions, make connections, and think collectively about both the possibilities and the tensions that AI is bringing up. So after the World Cafe, we'll have a coffee break together, and then we'll come back together at the end for some closing remarks and reflections. And just a quick practical note, there are washrooms nearby. They are accessible around the corner. If you have a hard time finding them, let any one of us know who's organizing the event, and we can absolutely help you to find the restroom. And again, as we move through the day, I want to invite everyone to participate with a spirit of openness and generosity and creativity. And so we're going to make space really today for different kinds of contributions from different backgrounds and perspectives. And it also means too that as audience members and attendees, you're very welcome to ask questions, particularly at the end of the panel and throughout the World Cafe anytime. So again, welcome. Thank you for being here. We're really glad to have you with us. And with that, I'll take my seat and we'll begin the panel. Okay, different microphone, different sound. So I introduced myself as Rachel Weldrick. I'm a member of the political science department here at Concordia. What I didn't really say is that I'm a social gerontologist. My PhD is in social gerontology. I'm not an AI expert. I love to work on issues of aging, housing, social integration, but I'm not really an AI scholar of any kind. So this is really new to me, and I'm really interested to hear what these fine folks on the panel have to say about some different questions that I've prepared about my own thinking around AI, the exciting parts, the scary parts, everything in between. And so I have 4 panelists here with me today. We have Marlene Chan, and Marlene Chan is the community representative on the governing board of Concordia's Engage Center for Research on Aging, where she helps drive community-engaged research to transform how we understand and experience aging. We have Fenwick McKelvey, who is an associate professor at Concordia University, specializing in digital politics and technology policy, and has authored several relevant books here, which is great, so we're happy to have Fenwick. We also have Narlon Da Silva, who is an assistant professor at Concordia, whose research explores how physical exercise and lifestyle factors can protect brain health and reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease. We also have Guiliana Cucinelli, who is an associate professor in education technology at Concordia University, leading really important research on how digital devices and virtual reality can shape learning, culture, and empathy in schools and workplaces. So what a fantastic mix of people we have here today. So I'm really, really pleased to have you. And so to begin the panel, I'd like to first ask each of you to take a few minutes to give an extended introduction of yourself, your work, and anything else relevant you'd like to share. And so I'd like to start with Marlene, then we'll move to Narlon, Fenwick, and Guiliana, please.
Oh dear. Glad to be here. Thank you for coming. People are online as well, so welcome to this session. I'm sure we're going to have a great conversation because everybody has a different experience, and I hope you'll share with us yours in this area of AI. Most relevant to this topic, I'm the community rep for the Engage Center for Aging, as Rachel just said. Parallel to attending most of the sessions of the working group on AI and aging over the last, I think it's 7 to 8 months that we've been doing this since September, the beginning of the university year. Parallel to that, I know this is gonna seem weird, but I hired a professional home organizer who turned out to be the best truly professional ever to help me downsize my 75 years of life, quote unquote stuff. I don't know if any of you have experienced that, or when there was, in September, there was a play at the Siegel Center called Big Stuff that was about a couple. It was supposed to be a comedy, but it's not very funny when you have to deal with all of the things that you've collected over time and not really dealt with them. My situation was in particular because I had a flood at my condo, and it was during COVID, where I think, you know, like how it relates to AI too, is that I think, and I don't know if you'll agree, but that since COVID, it's just been an onslaught of AI and everything. We've had to deal with so many things because we were at home and told that we're vulnerable, unable to get out and do things. It was a completely different lifestyle. I was talking about that play, but it was relevant because it's a rather emotional play about downsizing by the husband and wife team, who, after the death of one of each of their parents, they had all this stuff to deal with. And so we as an audience, it was participatory, so everybody in the audience was invited to name something that they had collected that they couldn't seem to deal with in their own life, and they dealt with that throughout the play, so it was quite interesting. Without going into too much detail, I now have hope for the future, although as an older person I'm not really considering. People don't ask me about my future. It's like I've hit a dead end, but I haven't really. And I learned a lot through the experience of downsizing, and also it's in tandem with what I did learn through attending the workshops. Oddly enough, while I and my whole body was going through intense daily sessions, once or twice a week, of keep or let go. I don't know if you've ever had to do that, but keep or let go. I was learning about AI and its hold on our attention and focus, because attention and focus is very much part of home organizing and trying to get your life in order. So I would say that, to sum up in a way what I've learned, AI has put me, or all of us really, in a competition with my real life. I find myself reading, listening, observing as a form of resistance, I try to be grounded in the real world, but it's in my own space, but it's not an easy thing, and you have to be constantly thinking about it. Joshua Bengio, I don't know if anybody listened to the thing on ideas about AI, which was sort of a state of the art with Bengio and Cory Doctorow and Astra Taylor talking about it. And he said, it does not matter whether I am an optimist or a pessimist. What matters is what can I do? What can we all do collectively? And I think that's sort of what I find most of all is like I'm left with where do I fit in all of this? And it helped me to do the home organizing because its attention is key and holds our power at whatever age we are, I think. And you have to stay vigilant daily, minute to minute almost, organized and plan, keep applying pressure. AI is more than a tool, I think, to control. And if I learned anything, most of all, it was from an indigenous point of view, where we don't consider AI as something that we can have a relationship with, like we do for other human beings, for non-humans. And if we did that, maybe there would be a way of looking at this a bit differently rather than avoiding it or trying to control it. Anyway, I'll quit.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? People on Zoom hopefully can hear me fine. Thank you all for being here, and thanks to the Engage Center for inviting me. I also wanted to actually thank Scott for the reminders, otherwise I wouldn't be here today, so really appreciate them. Not because I didn't want to, it's because 2 kids sleeping 4 hours a night really it's not conducive to good memory. So I am a researcher at Concordia. I've been at Concordia for about 1.5 years now. My current position is assistant professor. My work focuses on interventions to prevent dementia, very broadly speaking. Specifically speaking, I'm interested in lifestyle change through physical activity and exercise and how that can impart brain health and in the long run reduce the risk of a dementia diagnosis. So that means I'm studying the brain from a very specific perspective, which is prevention and long-term understanding of factors that influence brain health. And studying the brain means dealing with a lot of data, and AI has wonderful applications for how to handle data and what sort of questions as a researcher you can ask about the brain that would not be able to be answered without recent developments in AI and applied machine learning. And that is an area that I think it's very interesting. The reason why I'm on this panel, mostly I think it's because I'm not an AI specialist, but I'm very enthusiastic about its applications and research overall, my own research specifically in brain health, like I said, but also how it shapes the future of the way we think, produce, and share knowledge, which is basically what I'm supposed to do as a researcher. Think about knowledge, produce knowledge, and share knowledge. And that's why I'm here today. Thanks.
Thank you so much for being here today, and I just want to thank Engage and Scott also and the Applied AI Institute for making this possible. To me, this is such a really essential conversation. When we're talking about artificial intelligence, I think one of the biggest challenges for me in the research is thinking about how do we produce shared futures and who gets to produce those futures. And one of the things that I think is a real crisis now is that our capacity of producing plausible, desirable futures that include AI are limited and often being shaped by a few firms. And I think that that's one of the parts that really this project is help putting forward, just a kind of generational approach to dealing with artificial intelligence. That's always been, I think, one of the things that this line of research has always been so inspiring for me, is how when we think about different perspectives on technology and try to push back against the newness and often the kind of faddishness of technology, it really exposes different perspectives in what that technology is doing and how it's integrating into everyday lives. And that, I think, is actually one of the key directions when we're looking forward about how we might better imagine or really try to make shape of artificial intelligence. And I feel very often it's so hard to put forward a plan or try to make sense of what's going on because it's moving all at once so quickly. And very often the challenge now is that the ways that certain futures are being presented to us give us little time to respond. And so it's very much in a reactive mode of dealing with the launch of a new technology or a new proposal. And I think that's one of the kind of key challenges for groups like this, is how does it take the knowledge, the expertise in the rooms here to really put forward different visions and prototypes of how these technologies could work. And one of the things that I think is actually quite central for my own work in thinking about kind of AI governance and thinking about AI regulation is how much design-based criteria, age-appropriate design, is a really central policy recommendation. There's lots of anxiety right now about chatbots, and the government is certainly very anxious right now to regulate chatbots as quickly as it can. At the same time, what are we really talking about when we're putting forward these solutions? And very often, what I think to be mindful of is who are the users, what are the contexts, and what are the ways that different generations are using these technology. And rather putting that as kind of a secondary or something to the side of the technology's development, I think it's actually really quite central and a central mode going forward of how do we imagine effective technology regulation is really bringing in this age-appropriate design, whether it's for youth, whether it's for people, distracted parents like myself, or those aging. And I think that that's really one of the things that I think is important here to mention, is just that expertise and that perspective is so necessary for how we're approaching these kind of future directions and solutions for artificial intelligence. And I think that the particular way that we make sense of and pay attention to who's participating and who has access to setting these criteria, these expectations, how these technologies perform, I think is really essential. And that's why I'm so thankful to be part of this conversation.
First of all, thank you for the invitation to engage to the Applied Institute. Scott, yes, I second everything you said. The reminders have been fantastic. And also to the Ford Space, one of my favorite spaces in the world. I love being here. So I'm an associate professor in the Department of Education, specifically in educational technology. So we're a little different. We're in education, but it's and it's not specifically technology related. The way that we look at educational technology is actually through interventions, so human performance technology intervention. So sometimes when we have interventions, they don't always include technology. They might be something else. So my research creation program focuses on specifically the social, cultural, and educational impact of technology at large. My background is actually communication studies, education. I did a postdoc at MIT, also 1 year with Kim Sawchuk, and then landed back at my home at Concordia. So it was a full circle moment. At the moment, I have 2 research projects. The first actually explores the impact of AI on instructional design and educational content, specifically in schools, higher ed, and also K-12, but also in nonprofit and corporate settings, so workplace settings as well. And specifically, we use, it's not a model, it's an approach, and it's called ADDIE, which I'll talk to eventually as well. And it stands for Analysis, Design, Development, Implementation, and one that we often forget, Evaluation. So we look at AI through that particular approach. And something that we also often look at is exactly what Fenwick said, which was the age-appropriate educational interventions, right? If you're creating an intervention for children, it's not the same when you're hitting seniors or elders. The second project that I'm also working on, which is not directly linked to AI, but the process is actually in collaboration with the Leonardo da Vinci Center in St. Leonard in Montreal, and it's examining creative practices by Italian-Canadian artists and their connection to identity, memory, intergeneration, and tradition. The project itself is not about AI, but the back-end work that how we're using AI in certain tasks has been incredible and eye-opening. So I'll speak a bit of to that today as well. And yeah, that's it for me. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm really impressed with the breadth of knowledge and expertise we have here today. So I think this will be really interesting. So I want to start with something kind of high level, very broad. You know, especially throughout this kind of working group, the series of events we've had all year, I should say, we've been looking at AI from a lot of different angles, different topics, different themes. But I guess I'm curious from your perspectives and your work, what is the one thing that you think gets left out of most of the conversations around aging and AI? And I'll just invite anyone to start.
Jumping the gun here. Okay, good question. So I love semantics. As an English second language speaker, learning about language is fascinating. And so I go to the core of the term artificial intelligence. You know, I'm in the sciences, health sciences, so I'm not going to speak about art too much, but the art root of the term is something that relates to human creation. But nowadays, we don't think as artificial intelligence as human-created technology. But it is, right? So one of the ways that I conceive it is like it's a product of our own genius, right? So as a species, it can be applied. And I think the coolest thing is that we can make decisions about how we can apply it in research and in healthcare, in my context, or education, like was just alluded to, everyday life and industry. The key point is, do we even actually know what is from a perspective of its actually full scope? There's this very old myth, it's definitely a myth, that during exploration times, many European explorers shared the notion that indigenous peoples in the continents where they traveled to did not see the ships that came to visit them, because in their conception, there could not be such a thing. So if you don't know what you're seeing, it doesn't exist to you, which is a very terrible idea here, very specific with the colonization and stuff. But it serves as an interesting example of, we see AI applied everywhere, but do we really fully understand what it is? I don't think we see it yet, and I don't think we'll see it for decades, to be honest. We see it, it is part of our daily lives right now, but the consequences of it, we won't know for a very long time. Another very quick anecdote that relates to this concept is back when, I think it's in the early 1900s, when radioactive material was being heavily studied and people did not really know exactly the health consequences of radioactive materials. There were factories that made jewelry using radioactive materials that could glow in the dark. So you had people making watches and earrings and bracelets and selling those as very cool jewelry pieces because, there's something exciting about them without understanding the long-term consequences to health of such materials. And it didn't take very long for us to understand that it was really, really detrimental to health. This is a specific context of health, but that's what I'm thinking about AI from that perspective as well. We are absorbing a lot of it, and perhaps long-term consequences aren't clear yet.
I'll go next. I think what's left out of AI and aging in general, and I second exactly what you said, is not a grounded, but a common understanding of it, a common definition. Right, when we say AI, and even if I ask now, what does AI mean to, and we actually we asked this question as part of our summer institute that we ran last year with my colleague, Saul Carliner. We asked that question, and it was a room full of educators, and by educators, we mean your K-12 teachers, higher ed, corporate trainers. The answers were all over the place. It meant something different to everyone in the room. And in a way, that's interesting and rich, but at the same time, it's scary, right? Because it's this thing that we all know we can't see it, we can't touch it, but we all know it's there and it's creating this massive impact on every aspect of our life. So I think the not being able to define it, and I think aging is that's where it gets a little more scary for me, because it's not everyone has grown up with certain technologies, and so to not know equals you are fearful of what you don't know. And I think that's something that, again, like I said, there's two sides of it. It's interesting, at the same time, it could be scary at moments.
I guess I'll go next too. I think that's really an important thing to say about definition, because we talk AI like we know what we're talking about. It's one thing, it's a monolith, and break it. It needs to be broken down, and we have to know what we're each really trying to say about it. But what I feel it's missing for me is this idea of interdependence. Like we look at it like we're autonomous. I mean, I was raised to be, my own person, and I really don't need anybody to a limited extent. I mean, this home organizing thing I talk about, it was the hardest thing for me, was to find somebody to work with me, because I thought I'm supposed to be able to manage this myself, but I'm overwhelmed, I'm immobilized, and I don't know where to turn. And to find somebody, anybody, I mean, I went through maybe 6 people to try to help me, but the hardest part was just asking for help and saying that, like, can I overcome this? How can I deal with all of this overwhelm and this immobilization? And I think that the research tends to be about being autonomous, and you collect data to see how the person can improve their situation, but it's based on collection of data or individual data, and I think it's really about relationships that we need to focus on more.
Just briefly, because I think those are all really excellent points, but I wanted to kind of echo Marlene's point. I think one thing that is quite central to me when we're talking about AI is defining it as a public technology. And I think that's often missed when we talk about how AI is created, is that it's completely dependent upon public knowledge, public infrastructure, and what I like to emphasize is just the commons itself, a knowledge commons. And I think that really becomes a central frame, because rather than thinking about this technology as something that any one company or any one person can own, it really puts a responsibility of thinking about this as a shared thing. And that, I think, shifts the focus a lot, and certainly also puts on more accountability, I think, on a lot of the larger firms that are putting forward AI technologies. And I think one part that I always want to be mindful about is that the context in which we're allowing kind of AI to emerge is really not the full spectrum of what AI could be. And that's one of, I think, my concerns, is that in a very precarious time, when we're thinking about cost cutting and trying to deliver less with less, AI is often positioned as I think incorrectly, as a cost-saving measure. And I think that it really is disadvantaged if you're thinking about AI itself as it's with its own flourishing, as well as with human flourishing as well.
So this is really interesting, and Guiliana, your comments about developing some kind of common definitions, really well received. So maybe let's solidify this a little bit. So I'd like to ask all of you, in the context of your own work, your own life experiences, what does AI actually look like in the context of aging? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you thinking about? And maybe we'll start with Fenwick because of timing.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, one thing I wanted to really emphasize was thinking about AI and aging and digital divides. I think one of the things which has really always been central within this research is really trying to think about who has access and doesn't have that access to this technology. And I think real credit to Kim for, I think, always being someone who was in regulatory discussions at like the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, raising these issues about, hey, who had access to the internet, who could get online, who could afford that, And I think sometimes we miss just how much those issues still are not resolved. Affordability of digital technology is still a major barrier to participation. And that really now what we're seeing is the digital divide expanding to talk about new barriers to entry and access. And I think in particular what the term I quite like is slop economies, where if you can't afford to exit, increasingly people are trapped into a free internet, which is largely driven by slop content that's free, often predatorial, trying to kind of trick you or scam you. I mean, the number of times that people are navigating with this, I think really is one of the things I want to kind of punctuate is something that's happening is that because of digital divide being a continuing unresolved issue, we're now seeing this kind of manifold where how AI is kind of creating new information ecosystems that are really quite problematic. And I think that that's an important new digital divide, is how do we have access to the right to good information, to high quality information. And certainly that fits into a long history of what has been kind of activism and around communication activism about trying to expand access to digital society. And that now we're just seeing a new barrier with this, and certainly one that's only going to be exacerbated by firms moving towards more expensive models, advertising-based models. And so I think really this kind of moment we've been in is ending, and it's going to really come to the fore, the just new digital divide that this approach to AI has created.
So I think what you just said was really important, Fenwick, the cost saving, because that's often the go-to solution for a lot of these problems. And specifically in the educational context, if I look at instructional designers, so those are anyone in a corporate setting, nonprofit, even education, that's designing and developing educational material. What they're often faced with is, the issue is we need to onboard X amount of employees, let's say 200. We don't have much of a budget, make it work. And this can be, onboarding can be for safety regulation, it can be for consent, it can be for anything. So it's mandatory training that they have to take. So what happens is, what we're seeing, my colleague and I, is it's being used often for certain mundane tasks, right? So for analysis, for we're going to run data into it, what patterns are you picking up? Obviously still in collaboration with a human, but you've just eliminated a lot of hours of work. The other thing is, unless so, and this is where I have a little bit of issues with, is the use of AI for the creation of images or video. Just because as an artist, it touches my heart a little bit. But still, I can understand why it's being done. There's some incredible sophisticated software like Synthesia, which does AI videos. And if you don't know, and if you don't have a trained eye, you can't tell. It's almost impossible. So it is cost saving, but at the same time, in this context, it's also time saving. So suddenly, where 3 people would have been asked to do a certain task or to complete a team task, you're now down to 1 person. And the only way to get it done sometimes is through what we often call a buddy system, right? So it's a brainstorming, you're using AI as an actual buddy system to help you complete certain tasks. Again, it has its limitations. There's considerable amount of ethical issues as well. But what we try and teach is just being transparent and disclosing how you're actually using and engaging with the AI tools that you're using.
Thanks. Just back to the question about the daily context of AI and aging intersections. I want to bring the audience with us now. So help me here, people. Thanks. Who amongst you has interacted with a chatbot in the last 24 hours? Just raise your hand. I'll raise mine because it's true. Who has interacted with a chatbot? ChatGPT, Gemini? Who has done a Google search in the last 24 hours? There you go, everybody. So that's Gemini, interacted with Gemini right there. So it is very useful, is it not, from that perspective? You need an answer to a problem. You have a question, so you interact with it. And I think that's the probably the flagship of many of these companies is to make people rely on their technology for daily living, for daily activities. For instance, I think Gemini is great at summarizing content in a quick search that you don't need to go digging through multiple websites to find whatever you need. And the key advantage is that it's customized to your specific question. So it gives an answer exactly to what you asked. Meanwhile, if you go through an encyclopedia, go to whatever way you want to find answer to a question, it's far more layered. So you have to go through multiple steps in order to find an answer. So that is so time efficient from the perspective of the user, right? We perceive it as time efficient, and that is highly applicable, highly useful, I would say. You want to do a recipe at home, and you just want to know if lime pairs well with peanut butter, which I just did a couple of days ago, making a dish. I was like, I don't know if lime actually pairs well. And then I looked it up. Like, yeah, it has nice. It tastes amazing. I'm making it again. Obviously, like Thai food embodies citric tastes and peanut butter taste, whatever that is, the definition of that is. But it's very, very useful. I think the trick is that I think most people experience AI from that perspective. Not to make assumptions about what older people, older adults, elderly, seniors, whatever term you prefer, from your perspective, if that's the only way you use it. But from my perspective and in people that I interact with and what I see in the literature, most people are using it from that perspective, right? For search, basically everyday searches. The way that you may not perceive it, and that's where the key problem is when you're consuming content generated by AI that you don't necessarily know. As just mentioned, there are artworks and video content and a lot of things that you encounter through social media that you don't, or through TV and so on, that you don't know that was AI generated. And I think that is what is challenging to make sense of in terms of its impact in our daily lives. We're about to embark on the next round of elections for world leaders and predominant countries, or such as the United States and other countries that drive world affairs. And we don't know what the impact will be of those technologies in decision-making of people towards electing their representatives. And I'm Brazilian, and in Brazil we have this year's an election year, and the amount of fake videos driving specific agenda that people cannot tell. Current president being framed in a specific video that would be detrimental to his promotion as a politician and continuing in charge for his re-election. So all of this we cannot perceive very well. We cannot tell. So, and I think that perhaps amongst ourselves, some people may be a little bit more trained to perceive it. Some will not be trained to perceive it. But as a society, I think that's the key of the question is, to what extent are we being influenced by something that we don't know it's influencing us? And I will invite you to think about that. It's a very scary thought. To what extent are you being influenced by something that you don't know it's influencing you? And I'm afraid of that myself. Yeah, very afraid, actually. I have a daughter and a kid, afraid for them, actually. Very optimistic, I'll take.
Sure, I'll just finish off that question. I think I really relate to what Fenwick said too about, well, all of you, but that it's a new digital divide. Like we talk about digital divide as between rich and poor, but it's become more than that, and we're all implicated in it. And I just wanted to point out that, like, during one of the sessions we had with Dr. Gregorovich, I think it was from Brock University, at the last meeting we had, she recommended a book that I mean, it's fairly expensive, but I'm sure you can get it through the library system. But it's called Disabling Intelligences, Legacies of Eugenics and How We Are Wrong About AI. It's by Rua M. Williams, and she talks about the digital divide, the new digital divide, about the differences in AI, what are we exactly talking about? And at the end, she talks about a just AI toolkit. So I think, I mean, it's just too detailed to go into, but at the same time, I'm looking for things that I can relate to as an individual and in working in relationship with other people on the subject.
Thank you for that. So I have some thoughts around all of these tools, right? We're constantly talking about new AI tool being applied here, new AI tool being applied and used here. Often when AI tools are designed for older people to use or in their lives in one way for accessibility or health monitoring or daily living, they often come with a particular vision of what they think older people need and want in their lives. And sometimes those visions miss the mark, right? And so I guess I'm curious to hear from you three about maybe this gap, just in general, between the promise that a lot of these AI tools claim to make and what they can actually deliver, or what they do actually deliver in our lives. And you can interpret that question however you'd like, but I'm thinking about it through the lens of aging. And I'll invite any of you to start, whoever would like to start.
Would you kindly define for me what's involved in the aspect of the lens of aging? Because I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, okay, we're aging, we're unfamiliar, we carry with us generations of thinking that we're not familiar with this new technology, etc. But I'm also thinking, what about those who are physically challenged or who come across a moment in their lives when they might be in their mid-30s and all of a sudden have to face with mobility challenges and cognitive challenges. So what would be the difference really? I'm just curious. This is what I'm processing in my mind right now.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead? Yeah.
I'll answer that as a teacher. It's interesting because whether I'm doing research or whether I'm preparing something for a class activity or creating a syllabus or working in a community group, it's not something that I think about. It's just there. But that's how I've been trained. That's how I've been conditioned to think. That's how my academic course has taught me to do things. So it's not, my mind is inclusive, automatic. So whether I see aging, whether I see for folks with limited disability or somebody's visually impaired, for me it's inclusive. So when we're working on an implementation, an educational material, I'll always see it through what we like to call sort of a universal design principle, so inclusive design. And that just means you're not just designing, yes, you have a target audience in mind, or I don't like to say client because it's way too corporate, but a target audience in mind. But I'm still designing and thinking this through for everyone, for as many people as you can include. The reality is you're not going to be able to create something that is 100% inclusive. So if you think that, it's impossible. But you can damn design something that comes close to being 100% inclusive. And so when we're designing things, I'm not seeing it as aging, as gender, as anything. I'm seeing it as how can I be as inclusive as I can to make sure that you're participating and you feel comfortable and safe, that anyone in the room has that access and that no one is left out. So to answer that question, aging is just a piece of the larger inclusive puzzle. And I think that's often what's missing with AI is we see it as, and it's something that Fenwick said, and it's something that actually Neil Postman wrote about years ago, we see it as this mythical thing, this thing that's going to solve. It can be really useful, but we have to always consider the human and the inclusive design aspect of it. If you don't see it that way, you're no longer allowing everyone to be at the table with you and participating. So aging is a component of many pieces.
I would say if you did, is it working? Yeah. If you focus design on aging, disabled, or more marginalized groups, like you solve, well, as you say, you don't solve the problem maybe, but you come closer to solving the problem than if you start with somebody who is able and capable of moving around and more easily.
Just to add to the already excellent points made here, I think that I think of it as a continuum, and the continuum means you can have people along that continuum that meet certain predefined criteria of what able and disabled is. I think it's essential that in whoever is creating the tool to have a representation of everybody's inputs. Historically, I think we have not done that very well, at least in research. One example that I can give is brain health research. We think of aging as an old person, and that is not what I think of aging. And to me, it is a process. It's not a stage of life, it's a process, right? From a biological, psychological, developmental perspective, it's a continuum. And what research has done in the past is put a break point and say, from this moment on, you are declining. And that is ridiculous to think that way, unless that point is 25 years of age when our biology starts to slow down, which I already feel like, because I'm 25, obviously. Assistant professor at 25 would be awesome. Okay. But now, that is one angle, right? So how do we perceive aging, and what is your conception of it? When you intersect that with AI technologies, then it comes to a point where whoever is developing these technologies, do they have an interest in making them inclusive? From a commercial standpoint, they should, because then you just broaden your customer base. You have more people that would be more able to do this. And I see some companies that are thinking about that purely from a commercial perspective, wherein people don't need to be typing on a computer to interact with a chatbot. They can speak to it. So OpenAI and other companies now follow suit, that they have a voice system. Obviously, from the chatbot's perspective, it's slightly more challenging, because then you have to adapt to accents and mispronunciations. It's far more complex, but it works, right? You speak to a phone and it speaks back to you. So I think that's inclusive. From the other perspective, you could use interact via Braille, right? So that's one of the ways that you can do this. For aging, for instance, what are the inclusive, perhaps, adaptations that would need to be done to conform? And again, I think of it as a spectrum. You can, for some chatbots, adjust the language that it used to speak to you. You could clearly ask it, please use specific language. For instance, you might prefer that it's more prosaic or more succinct or more direct. But those are adjustments that you can make to suit your own needs, and that's why it's so cool, right? So from the user's perspective, as soon as you, perhaps in terms of interaction with the tool, you can ask it to adjust to you, at least with chatbots, which is, again, most of what we do here is to interact with chatbots. For instance, whenever I interact with it, I ask it to be a little bit more critical, less pleasing, or less, basically, I'm not trying to have it cater to me, but it's trying to do so, so I use it more often. Obviously, if you go and interact with a chatbot that calls you an idiot, you're less likely to go back to interact with it, because now you think that it is an idiot. And I think it's really nice that you can adjust from your perspective. Now, very briefly, sorry to hog the mic, I'm sorry. It's just from the other perspective of what does AI deliver in my research. One example is it is really useful in brain health research, because it can help make predictions that would not be possible without it. One example is, would you be interested in knowing how old your brain is? So you have chronological age, right, which is time of birth until now, but your brain might have experienced aging in your body a slightly different way because of your choices, right? So you could, for instance, a 55-year-old smoker has a very different biology than a 55-year-old marathon runner. And so your brain, being the organ most adapted to the environment, most shaped by the environment, and primed by evolution, for those of us who believe in evolution. Some people don't, but that's okay. They're wrong, I'm kidding. But the idea is our brains really are shaped by the environment. And with AI models, you can use data collected, measuring brain volume, sizes, and stuff, to derive very interesting metrics. You could say, you know, your brain looks like 5 years younger for your matched gender, sex, age, and education level. You're doing something right. That type of statement could have not been made without advancements in AI models. Better yet, without advancements in the hardware that allows you to run those tests, right? GPUs and stuff. That's why companies that make GPUs, such as NVIDIA, are the largest grossing companies in the world. So from my perspective, it delivers a lot. Now, does that have any implications for health, for instance? To me, many implications. Oh, GPUs. Are you guys familiar with GPUs? I don't know it myself. I'm kidding. It's a graphical processing unit, so computers that allow you to make very simple tasks in parallel, so at the same time. One example is you can use a GPU to do 100,000 equations at the same time, while a CPU would do a very complex math problem, but would take much longer to do so. So if you want a simple task done 1,000,000 times, GPUs really help because it's made of small processing units that does that computation very efficiently. So it basically does small tasks, but at the same time in a very efficient manner. It was designed primarily for gaming and video editing. That's why graphics come into play. If you guys ever played PS2, for instance, and you play PS5, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 5, you see the advancement is in the GPUs. It is so crazy that research in developing countries, Brazil, especially with colleagues of mine, 10 years ago, we had to use video games to do artificial intelligence research because that's where the hardware was. There were no computers available that you could use to do AI, machine learning at least. And the idea is you have 3 billion data points that you just need to do one operation with each. GPUs really help you get there in an efficient manner. That's why they're so expensive, actually.
I think that's really interesting. And your pieces about brain health and brain age, I think, lead us really nicely into the next question. So, you know, if you're at all familiar with the AI and aging space, you know that as these new tools are coming out month after month, a lot of them have to do with monitoring and tracking bodies, either at home or in care spaces, different sorts of sensors on doors, sensors in toilets to measure your urine content. I mean, all sorts of things. We won't go too far down that pathway today. But my point here is that a lot of these new AI tools have to do with tracking and monitoring bodies, right? And so that's creating and generating a lot of data about aging bodies. But of course, data isn't always neutral, right? Data doesn't just describe bodies. It can classify bodies. It can make judgments about bodies as they're getting older. And so I guess I'm curious to hear from the three of you, you know, how do we think about both sides of that coin, like maybe the importance and the value of measuring and monitoring bodies in different ways, but also the challenges that come with that about making judgments about bodies and brains and things like that. Any thoughts on that?
Well, from my perspective, I look at it as surveillance. Like, it's like somebody is not. I mean, I know the intention is good, but like, for example, I think there's a apartment block where they made it into a smart home so that there was a kind of a competition. I'm not sure how it all worked, but for people they had to be over a certain age and be able to go into this building where everything was monitored and everything, and that's seen as a good thing. But I don't know that I want to be surveyed all the time or be concerned that there is something there. Like something that people often ask is number of falls. And so if you don't have a lot of falls, you're not in a category where they will look at you. Like I can't get somebody, a social worker, to come and see me from the CLSC because I'm not in that bad a shape. Like you're not bedridden. I have to say I'm bedridden and I can't go about things by myself. And it's sort of goes against the grain, but I think it could be useful, but I just find that the data is collected without like us involved. Like I think too, like when somebody was talking about disabled, like there's a motto, I guess, or when the disabled were trying to make a statement, they said nothing about us without us, you know, like, or for us, you know, there's so many things that everybody knows better than you what you need. And you end up being often in a place where I'm being babysat, you know, it's not like I have agency and I can decide I'm not going to have those vegetables today or whatever.
Talking too much, okay. I did have an. Yeah, sorry. He really was disgusted with the opinions that we said here, and Fenwick just left because of that. Kidding. He had another commitment. Yeah. So the idea of data being used to monitor us is really wild. And who here has a smartphone? Right. Oh my God. Okay. We're all doomed. So these devices carry something to the effect of measuring movement, right? So you raise it, it knows that it lifted it, you put it down, it knows that you put it down. It's accelerometry, so it measures gravitational acceleration or mass acceleration, right? So whenever you move around, it knows that you're moving around. That might seem inconsequential, but when you hit agree to the terms and conditions of using this device, you might be saying, you can use the data of how I move about to make predictions about what I do and then offer me products for that. And to the same extent, if you use WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, even Google search, there's a button in there that you say, you can record the audio, the ambient audio. So it will capture what you're saying, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, there's a full restaurant, very close to here. Google is offering me a Vietnamese place to go eat. How does it know? It's because it's recording what you're saying. And that's very well crafted, layered in the terms and conditions of use. And now, basically, you have a device that monitors you with your consent, with our consent, without actually fully aware of that consent. And that, again, for offering some products may even be convenient, right? Like if you really feel like having pad thai, then there's this suggestion. I'm really fixated on that now. But it is great, right? So it's there. It offers you. So it skips a few steps. But it's not random what type of offering you get. You're going to get that one restaurant that is paying for ads through that service, through Google, for instance, or on Instagram. So our data is highly valuable, and we consent to give it away, the way we move, what we speak, and I'm not sure texting if it's reading whatever you text. It is. I'm not sure if it's using it, but it certainly is. Like if you send an iMessage to your friend or a family member mentioning something, I don't know if the company is actually using the content of that, because that is more outright privacy violations. But the way you move around, whatever you say in the environment, is certainly used to make predictions about your behavior and then offer you something as a product. Now okay, so that might be inconsequential. Now imagine that you are interested in health behaviors and you're interested in knowing how healthy somebody is based on their activity. And then there is an insurance company that's trying to basically adjust its business model according with the target audience that it wants to work with. Let's say older adults, just as an example, completely irrelevant to this meeting. Let's say you have an older adult population and you want to make predictions and you want to adjust your premiums based on the likelihood of that population having a heart attack in 10 years from now. And where would you find such data? Do you think data brokers would have that data about how physically active a certain segment of society is? And then they could come to, all right, you're a 60-year-old, okay, what is your physical activity levels? You don't have to divulge that information, but it can make predictions about where you live. You know, for most people living in this postal code or in this part of the city of Montreal, physical activity levels are very low. Therefore, the risk of this person developing hypertension, for instance, is very high. So let's just, as a business model, make sure that our premiums, as insurance companies, for instance, would be adjusted to the likelihood of cardiovascular events happening here. Obviously, free healthcare in Canada, quote unquote, so that's not much of a concern, but in the US, it's a legitimate concern. And in the spectrum of Alzheimer's dementia, there's one type of gene variant that increases your risk of having Alzheimer's. So if you go and do a genetic test and find that gene, you are high at risk. In the past, people were concerned about that because then you could have insurance companies having access to that information within your medical records and then making specific adjustments to your insurance policy because you're likely to have Alzheimer's in 20 years, so let's charge you a little bit more now. Now, that is genetics, right? Imagine if you could do that using data about people's behaviors that would predict vascular health, cardiovascular health in 10 years. What is the #1 killer or #1 disease that's driving mortality worldwide? It's heart attacks, it's strokes, cardiovascular health, and cerebrovascular health. So these devices capture a lot of data about us that we may not be aware that could be brokered by companies to make predictions about our health outcomes 20 years from now that we are not aware of. That's my perspective as somebody who is not an expert on this, just interested on it.
Thank you. This is a really, really interesting question, and it is a difficult one to answer because of what both of you have already mentioned. There's the pros, there's the cons, right? So it's a bit of a catch-22. But I go back to my earlier comment, which is who's left out, right? So not all, and specifically with seniors and elders, not all seniors and elders have cell phones, or more specifically, smartphones, right? So that's not necessarily collecting everyone's data and behavior. And so that, to me, is a bit of an issue because now we're making assumptions or we're categorizing based on what we've managed and have been able to collect, but that doesn't represent everyone. I know that's always an issue with research, but that's one of at the core, I find that a little bit problematic. The tracking, the monitoring is interesting. It becomes dangerous when we start to classify and when it's used for surveillance and for control. So the actual act of tracking and monitoring could be interesting and could be very valuable. However, when, like you said, right, because you haven't fallen enough times, I can push you, you can fall a few times and you'll get it. That's where it becomes dangerous, right? Because you're now outside of that bracket of, well, she hasn't fallen 13 times, therefore no, CLSE is not coming. So that's where it becomes problematic, right? Because the data is not being useful for you because you're not part of the norm of what's happening. And if I can speak to an actual personal example, I had two nonnas, my grandmothers, one who lived here in Montreal, one who lived in Italy. The one in Italy, about 15 years ago, she fell in her home. She was stubborn. Didn't want to move into a home because in Italy, God forbid you move into a home, it's the end of the world, your pride, your family's not taking care of you, you're being neglected, which is not true. Refused to move into a home, stubborn, wanted to stay in her house, didn't have anyone with her, and she fell off her bed and was lying down on the ground for about 3 days. Until the neighbor next door who used to bring her vegetables knocked on the door, no one was answering. Finally, he managed to sneak in by the back window and saw her lying down on the floor. Finally, she realized at that point, maybe I need to go into a home. We managed to get her into a home. She was fine after that. She passed away after that, but the fall basically became a moment for her where I need help. So no one was aware that she had fallen, except for the next door neighbor. My grandmother here, who passed away about 2 years ago, we decided as family to get her a lifeline, right? Because same thing, just as stubborn, it's something in Italian blood. Refused to go into a home, didn't want to move in with us, so we said, fine, but the agreement is you stay at your house, you do as you wish, you're independent, however, we're getting you a lifeline. So we got her the lifeline. She fell about 3 times. It was small falls, nothing major, but the help was instant. So in this example, the surveillance part, right, was about care. Now, yes, I know they keep, because you sign off on these agreements, right, they keep the amount of falls, and they're probably going to use it like later for something else. But there it was a matter of care, safety, and just for us to feel at peace that she was fine. So in that case, it worked out well. The technology and the use of the detection worked out well. And in fact, it saved the 3rd time, it actually saved her life. So it's difficult, because you could look at it through, if you remove the emotional aspect of it and the care component, you definitely see issues. Yes, you're tracking, you're monitoring, and being surveilled. That could be used against me. However, if you flip that side, like your question is asking, I also see it as a way of a peace of mind. I'm caring for this person who is my grandmother that I love to pieces. So at the same time, it gives you, it's difficult. And it's the same thing in terms of an educational context. We see the same argument in schools, right, where our teachers are overworked, where there's too much going on. Yes, they'll use ChatGPT for something, and then they're cheating, but they're arguing it as they're trying to save time and trying to help the students. I like these questions, but they're really difficult when you inject the emotional aspect to it. Because I see surveillance, I think negative, but at the same time, the flip side is it saved my grandmother's life. So it's a tough question to ask. And of course, my heart's the first thing that goes, so the emotion is.
That's what they put in commercials.
I know. Damn marketing works well.
Well, you started out by saying who's left out. Yeah. And the other side of that, I think, is who benefits, like, from this. So, yeah, I know it's not an easy one.
And actually, just to go back to that, what you mentioned, right, is when everyone echoed this, when these technologies or these hardwares are created, it's who's involved. Are the users involved in the actual creation of it? You're starting to see little projects and areas where they are paying attention. I think more in medical, you're seeing it a lot more than I know I can speak to it in terms of educational. But that's often what's missing, is the user. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. That's a big piece that needs to be there.
Yeah, you've both kind of preempted me, I think, really, really clearly here, and importantly, and Marlene, you said you were referencing the old adage in disability studies and disability activism around nothing about us without us, and so I think most of us in this room would agree as well when it comes to the development of new AI tools. Of course, especially if they're geared towards older people should be part of the process of developing and testing and refining and really setting the priorities and agendas for these sorts of new tools. And yet we know in practice that doesn't always happen. And so I guess I'm curious to hear from you, from your various perspectives, what would meaningful participation and inclusive participation look like in the development of new and emerging AI technologies?
What is the trust factor? Can we rely? Is it reliable? Is AI reliable? Because, like, I use a lot, but I wonder, is it truthful? Is it telling me the truth? Can I rely on it?
Define truth.
Trust no one.
Well, in terms of research, like if you're not feeling well, that's the first place I'm going to go to is AI and ask. But is it reliable?
what do you trust in a doctor that gives you a diagnosis? I like this because we're talking too much. Yeah.
Testing? Tests? Lab tests?
Okay. So I think also accountability, right? Because if the doctor gets it wrong, then there are consequences to the doctor's own their job and their whatever, right? So our trust comes from I feel like from two places, which is first the person needs to be accountable to somebody for making their medical decision, right? So a doctor would be accountable to their department, to their jurisdiction, to whatever. And the fact that to be a doctor in first place, they had to pass through a lot of testing and preparation and so on. So we trust their training and we trust their accountability. And they are aided by a lot of tools, including blood testing and so on. So that's what we trust. What the data suggests is that a lot of the models implemented in medical research are more accurate than individual doctors because they are really well trained, the models. But to whom are they accountable? I don't know. But this is in a medical setting, if there is, this what the testing has been. And Nature is one of the major journals, research journals worldwide. A couple of days ago published an editorial, which I think it's open access so anyone can read, that says, okay, prove to us the medical value of AI. And the editorial goes into detail about whether it's usually, whether it's valued or not, right? So it has a lot of potential, but there's not evidence that it is actually useful when applied in many settings. But from the perspective of using a chatbot to diagnose a problem that you have, to me, it is challenging because of the consequences of it, right? So if it tells you that you likely have cancer, imagine the consequences of that because you had a pimple. Right? Oh, that really looks like cancer. Well, actually, you can upload a photo to it, have it diagnose that photo, and it'll give you some feedback. It will say, well, no, this angle, this size, this shape, but it's trained on numbers that define the pigmentation of the picture. It's not a doctor, it doesn't understand the complexity of who you are and so on. You could give it a list of symptoms and it will give you a likely diagnosis based on medical research that it's been trained on, but it doesn't have context. And every single chatbot that you use, at the very bottom, in a very tiny font that you have to zoom in to see, it says, AI can make mistakes, do not use that as medical advice. Sometimes it says that AI makes mistakes, please double check the content, please double. So that is the biggest excuse that the companies that make these chatbots can use, just you're using it at your own risk. It's your own judgment, I would say. My feeling as an experienced user at this point is, and I'm in no position to give any medical advice to anybody whatsoever, it is pretty accurate.
It is?
It is pretty accurate, especially if you use paid versions of the models. Claude, which is one of the most well-trained, it's one of the few companies that have concerns for ethics and overall privacy and so on for AI use. It's called Anthropic. They make Claude. Yes. So Claude is one of, I'm not paid by Anthropic. I'm not paid by, I'm just saying, of the models that I've tested, it seems one of most reliable. Now, it says right there, do not trust the answers that it gives to you, double check the answers. It seems like a very tempting idea to go to a chatbot to help figure out what's wrong with you. We're far away from that being actually trustworthy. Yeah, that's my perspective. I'm in no position to give you any solutions for that. I'm just sharing what I think.
Because I did put my test results into one of the bots, and it was pretty good. The answers were, but is it as can we trust it? Is it reliable? On certain points, it complimented me, so keep it up. It's good, and some points it highlighted like not risk but potential, you know. So
I'd just like to add that one of our first sessions was about trust, and I think like what I got out of that was that trust has to be built, and it takes a long time to do it, and there's not the patience or the time to really develop a kind of a trust with either even your doctor. Now you can see him for 20 minutes or something, 15 in some cases, and it's just like come with something right away, and you can't expect an answer that you can trust almost immediately. You know, we have to build these kinds of relationships. That's why I'm really learning from all of this that it is like we've put AI into this place where it's far from us, and it's something we need to control, and it could harm us, although there are benefits. But how can we develop something that has got trust built into it? But so far, I don't think we do.
I have a question.
Yeah, can we hold
Okay.
just until the end? We'll be there in a
Okay.
few minutes. Yeah, absolutely, and then we'll welcome our
It
next
has to do with
questions.
trust.
Thank you.
So to actually, to answer the question also to go back to the idea of trust, so the meaningful participation is the development and including the users in the in the actual development. You know, I remember a few years ago through actually Kim, and it was through Engage and Act, we ran some workshops here for intergenerational storytelling. That was the idea, that was the topic. So there were myself, another researcher, Kim was there. We had some participants from the different community groups that were involved, seniors, elders. And we actually we developed, we co-designed what we call a co-design actual game, a board game. And the board game had to do with, I don't remember the topic, I think it was about Montreal and construction, believe it or not. Not that there's anything to say about that, but that was what the game was about. It was about safety and navigation accessibility. That's what it was. And so as part of that, we had younger participants, middle-aged adults, and then we had seniors that were involved. And the perspectives were very different. With the seniors and elders not been part of the co-design process, the results would have been significantly different because their perspective wasn't there. And that plays the other way around. If the younger participants' perspective wasn't there, there would have been something missing. So to establish a proper, what we call a co-design approach, is to have all of the stakeholders involved, as many as you can. And I think that's something that it has been happening with a lot of AI tools, but it's also often missing. Recently, actually, a few weeks ago, we were in Bologna, University of Bologna, and they have a really interesting partnership with a center. It's a nonprofit school, community school called the Scuola di Guiliana. And it's a really wealthy family who established this community center who serves as an actual school. So it's grade 1 to, I think, grade 8. And the goal there is everything is focused on, it's STEAM related, STEAM, the A is there, right? And that's important, A is the arts component. So science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And that's the core of how those students are being educated. So they're seeing the technology aspect, and they get to actually, we were brought onto a tour of a startup, an actual startup center, and they get to see the machines, the hardware, what we call the fun, glittery stuff, but there's also the human aspect of it, right? So their understanding and the way they're being taught is to merge the two together, which we don't often see, but that's part of this particular school and how they educate the kids there. So they're not only building the technology hands-on, but they're also critiquing what it can do, what its limitations are. And there's a lot of parents that are involved, seniors that are involved. So it's in essence, it's a pure co-design way to actually teach, right? That's not possible everywhere, I understand that. But that's an excellent example of where co-design from a very young age allows them to finally shape an understanding of this is how you should navigate the world, always considering who's being affected, who's being left out. Oh, and I just thought, actually one more thing that I want to add to yours, and to answer that question is, since COVID, the issue has been expertise. experts have been challenged. It's as if that doesn't matter anymore, right? Like, I get it, I mean, the anti-vaccines, the challenging of the science, the medical system, all of that. But all of a sudden, researchers are, well, okay, and you did a PhD, so, okay, we're experts in what we studied, right? So it's that particular word that's become an issue, right? So we go to chat, GPT or Clo, whichever. Yes, it has the data, it's got the knowledge, you're actually right. It's pinpointed something this week about my dog that I could have saved $1,500 at the vet. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily pick up the nuances or what we call the sort of the systems thinking approach, which is not just the piece itself, but how does the piece relate to everything around it. But expertise is a big, like you go to a doctor because they have the expertise, the accountability, the everything, right? So that's a word that's taken a bit of a hit in the last few years.
Marlene, would you like to comment just your thoughts on how you think we can better include like meaningful participation from older adults when we're developing new technologies of any kind, and what that might look like from your perspective?
Well, I just find that, involving people, like we've been saying, and like the user, like so many things are developed without you, or because a funder has money for a certain thing, and somebody will come to you and say, can you be part of my research? I need older participants, and they've got the money, they've made the design, they know what it is. Like, initially, I would just say yes to anything. I was just so glad somebody was taking me into account. But you find that when you do that, it's not so beneficial to you. In fact, you sign a consent form that says this won't be beneficial to you. So, I know there's reasons for that, but at the same time, it's like there's not a reciprocity. There's no kind of, it's always like I'm at the other end. I'm the user, yes, but that doesn't have sway at the beginning. So, yeah, it's a bit late.
So I think what we'll do, we'll have maybe one or two more questions up here, and then we will absolutely leave lots of time, about 15 minutes even, for audience questions. So, but I just want to ask, maybe one more official question here up at the panel. We've talked a lot already today about some of the possibilities of AI, some of the risks of AI, all sorts of things. I want you to think a little bit about AI futures, just for a moment, from any perspective that makes sense to you. What are you hopeful about? What are you excited about in the future of AI? And maybe as a secondary question, when you imagine AI and aging in one way or another done well in 5, 10 years, what does that look like? What have we achieved at that time?
What I would imagine and love AI to do is clean my house and take care of cooking. Not the cooking, but just cleaning. That would be fantastic. And laundry. I think, and I know we've said it before, but I think if when I imagine AI and aging and sort of it within a positive light, I think I would really like to see, again, the inclusive lens being used when things are designed. It's something it's often been an issue with any technology, but I think more so this one. And it's unfortunate because it tends to be on an open platform most of the time. So the possibilities are there. I think the issue is the unknown. Like we said earlier, we can't even come up with a definition, a group understanding of what AI, like I'm sure if I ask how do you define AI, it's gonna be different answers. So we're not starting from a common starting place, which is fine sometimes, but when it comes to technology, there's disadvantages for that. So I think if we start to see it in more of a balanced perspective where, yes, we understand its implications, we understand what it can do to harm, but also start to see the positive light of, like we mentioned earlier, yes, it can track and can survey, but at the same time, it offers a sense of safety and peace. I think that's the ideal scenario for me would be that, is starting to understand, how do we design these interventions, these tools, with keeping everybody in mind and that everyone has access to it equally as well, which again is not a guarantee, but we can try our best to achieve that objective.
I think in the context of aging, it can help foster independence and self-efficacy. So what I mean by that is we can probably live a little bit more independent when we have an assistant that would help fix some problems or would help with daily activities that are otherwise difficult to do or inconvenient. One example is everybody familiar with AI agents? Okay, AI agent is a chat type bot that takes over your computer for you. So right now, you go on Google or Gemini and you ask it questions, it gives you answers. But you can install a software, such as ChatGPT has its own software. Google has one called Anti-Gravity, and you install it on a computer, and then you give it permission to execute commands in your computer. For instance, you could tell it, open Google Chrome, and it will ask you for your permission to do that. So the software goes and opens a browser for you to go and search. What you can do with that is you can ask your computer to do your groceries online, or to make travel arrangements and book them. And then at the very end, you just click the button, like enter credit card information. It can basically do mundane tasks that you otherwise would not want to do, maybe if you really enjoy grocery shopping, but or it can text. Like right now, you can use some assistants, but to just text people. But in this context, it basically is you using your computer to do something for you. Lots of risks with that because it's an AI model that has access to the architecture of your computer, to the hardware, to everything that's in it, including personal information, bank account details, your medical exams that sitting on your desktop saying very important medical exam, do not open, and it will. But what the companies are doing is putting lots of layers of safety and privacy layers that would that the agent would need your permission every time it needs to do something on your computer. And then you can agree to it doing more or less. For instance, the agent can go on the web, but cannot add personal information of yours to whatever website it is on. So the worst case scenario here is you decide that you're gonna cook some spaghetti bolognese, since you mentioned bologna, right? Very much around food here. So let's say you decide to do that, and then you on your computer, you get a recipe, and the agent, it's helping you through it. And then you go eat, leave your computer on your desk, and then you come back, and the agent is gone wild. It's overruled or basically overruled all the permissions you gave it. Now it's on the internet trying to, it could happen if somebody, that is a scenario that right now, basically it's a computer that's self-sentient, is that the term? It's some level of consciousness and controls over your own computer. And if your computer has private information of yours, which for the most part ours do, then it's a concern. So I've been piloting some of these agents just for instance, I need to build a website for my own lab, and I don't know how to code well enough to make a website, but the agent can create the code. It can pilot it, meaning it opens it on like a browser. It takes a screenshot, it videos my own computer screen, it feeds that back onto its own system, and it says, it looks good, or it looks bad, or so it basically does everything, and I just have to click yes, yes, every time he wants to do something there. Very useful, very risky at the same time. When we talk about it here, sometimes I feel like I am, even with my colleagues, I'm sounding like the one person who's very, pessimistic about the future, and like the one person yelling at conspiracy theorist yelling at clouds in a way. But I think it's very hopeful in other aspects. Nobody loves waiting in ER room 8 hours to get something diagnosed that could have been managed easily through a model. You know, you enter your symptoms, and there's just the first-year resident to review briefly the AI decision based on the symptoms that you entered, and then on you go. So that could be one example that you go, instead of waiting for hours in the ER, you go to a kiosk, enter your symptoms, enter your health card information. It has your history. It knows what likely condition you're presenting based on whatever you presented before. There's just a human somewhere along the way to say, the diagnosis makes sense, the prescription makes sense, here's my signature, and off you go. So that could streamline a little bit the bottlenecks that we have in ER departments in Canada and across the globe. It also can make the world more equitable. You could go to developing countries, low resource settings that do not have access to a medical doctor in person, and these chatbots could facilitate access to a doctor, for instance, these models. In India, I have a colleague who is a neurologist, and there are parts of the Indian subcontinent wherein it's one neurologist per 3 to 4 million people. That's the ratio of, especially the most populous country in the world. And so how can you even begin to manage that? One neurologist to 2 to 3 million people in some places. And so you could remove some bottlenecks that way. That's why I think it's very, very hopeful. Overall, I'm more optimistic than pessimistic. But to quote the father or godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, he's the Nobel Prize winner last year, a couple of years ago, shared with whoever developed the Google model. He said, if you really want to have a future with AI, I think it's our ability to change that has passed. It's like we are very much unable to change how basically we have to live with it. We cannot get rid of it. We have to live with it. And he said, if you really want to have a job, maybe you should be a plumber or something very intricate that no chatbot, no agent could do. Basically manual functions. He says, well, get a plumbing job, like, you know, go to trade school, and you'll forever have a job because it's less likely that those kinds of jobs will be threatened. So Geoffrey Hinton, does not feel very optimistic. I feel optimistic, but it depends on the day today. It's cloudy, so not so much. Maybe when it's sunny, I'll feel more optimistic.
Yeah, we'll give Marlene the last word, and then we'll open it up to audience questions.
Oh dear, I don't never like getting the last word. I'm wondering if an AI agent is like Copilot that we see on no, that's different. What I was going to say about this question is that I find that right now everything is transactional. Somebody's making money. I'm not making any money. It's supposed to be it's supposed to be like more involving of the user, and I hope that it can change to a relational system rather than a transactional system. That's about what I would think.
Thank you so much for your thoughts on all of these pieces. It's been really interesting. So now I will open it up officially to the audience if we have a roaming mic. So yeah, we'll maybe start in the front row here and go from there and get through a few before lunchtime. Yeah.
Just want to mention that those of you joining us on Zoom, if you have any comments or questions, I know there's been some comments coming in already, just pop those into the chat and we can do our best to read it out. But we have a question here in the space.
Yeah, one comment and a couple of questions. This sounds exactly, almost to a T, like the discussions in the 70s and 80s about genetic engineering. And everybody was scared about cloning human beings and so on. And look at the amazing developments that have come from the ability developing vaccines for COVID within a year. I mean, that's unheard of. Curing disease in unborn children by changing their genetic code. The two questions that I have, and it probably is a reflection of my age, I'm 78, the two elephants in the room for me are that I have always kind of assumed until basically now, and I sense it's changing, but my fear was that basically AI has been programmed by primarily by 24-year-old white men in Silicon Valley, and that disturbs me enormously. And I think there's a reflection of that in the content that people are seeing. And the other question is, I've forgotten. That's why I need AI, because I actually do use it, but I wouldn't dream of handing over responsibility to AI to write letters for me. I'm a writer. Why would I do that? You know, maybe, but I do see how, for example, I run an NGO, drafting a document on the protocols and the management of our organization. He did it, it did it, they did it within, I don't know, an hour. It would have taken me at least 2 or 3 weeks. And so I'm very grateful for that. But I like your comment. Who is programming AI at this point?
A quick note on the mundane tasks that you can do, draft a protocol. Mundane, thanks. As a writer would do. Okay, so the thing is, it doesn't think outside the box. It thinks on whatever it's trained, and it starts to develop its own patterns over time. And the more you use it, the more you realize that if everyone here were to use a similar chatbot to do the same task, that the output would be very similar. So there is this, it's called reduced variability, so you have less variation in the output. And variation is a good thing overall, right? So if each of us were to draft the same protocol, it could be very different. But one of my concerns with AI writing is that it's creating this very generic, apersonal product or output, which is maybe for protocols or standard operating procedures, who cares? But for other things, like you said, a letter would be really not the best option. About the 24-year-old white man running this, yeah, it is, I agree with you, the interest of the people who developed these and hold control over the future of these technologies. It's really dark with the context. If you remember, maybe you're a fan of Trump, good for you, but maybe you're not. No, you know you like the audience,
I live
right?
in Montreal for a reason.
So you remember Trump's inauguration, sitting in the second row, the front row, to his inauguration, lending support to his campaign, now then successful campaign. You had the CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman. You had Mark Zuckerberg, the Facebook CEO, whatever the position is. Google's CFO, CEO, something like that as well. And there was Elon Musk was there at the, Jeff Bezos, yeah. And those are the people that really control a large share of the companies, right? And now this is the fear, is that monopoly over these technologies that we use every day will definitely shape how our society will unfold, and the people running it may not care about certain groups, certain peoples. Especially, the only thing that to counter your point about the genetic engineering and how it's similar, the crisis that we live in right now, is that the military implications of AI is something that's very unique and novel. Military implications, yes. I'm not sure if you follow the Chinese war. No, they don't use the word war, but the Chinese government has programs on technology, the development of technology for self-defense, that they are the most advanced, as far as we know, because the US might have something more advanced, of robots that are really AI powered at this stage to defend national interests. And then, so that is one example wherein there is an actual threat to these technologies through military means, right? The drones that are being heavily involved now in the war in the Middle East, for instance, most of them are AI, in the Ukraine and Russia war as well, most of them are AI powered as well. So I think that is where a lot of the concern comes in, because it's not really, everybody sees ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot, but in the background, these technologies are used to advance military equipment. At some point, we don't have a human making a decision whether or not to take a shot or to make.
The question I forgot to ask, because I couldn't remember it, is that the fear has been programmed into us that AI will eventually take over and become more intelligent, essentially, than us. Personally, I doubt that, because I don't think, I mean, our brains individually are a million times more effective than any AI system at this point, as far as I understand it. But what's your comment?
I'm sorry, I disagree. I think it depends how you measure what effectiveness is, because AI, machine learning chatbots cannot feel. So if you go through that route of, like once I was experimenting with ChatGPT, I said, what does it feel like to be loved? And then it gave me an answer. And I said, well, you can't feel, how can you produce an answer? And it says, well, yeah, you're right, I can't feel. I'm a model trained on text that people have written, and based on descriptions of what love feels like in the literature, this is what I would likely feel. So that's one of the differences between humans and these bots. It's just that our feeling is like emotion and so on. It's something that only we can experience in relation to them. But for every other task that can measure intelligence, we are outmatched individually. As a collective, not, but individually. And there's, you can measure this by looking at how chatbot or AI models play AlphaGo, which is perhaps the most complex game out there. It's like a super advanced type of chess that it's been a while since humans have been able to win in such a game that it requires complex thinking. But this is like one person against a model, maybe 1,000 individuals against a model. Maybe that would be like, what we're talking about is at scale, right? So I think there is something that for every single task that involves reasoning, we are outmatched. For anything that means it producing intelligence, we are unfortunately outmatched, because it is trained on hundreds of years of our own intelligence, our own knowledge, and it is far more capable to producing knowledge as well than we are. And this is not me. This is based on interviews and series and things that I've read from like Jeff Hinton as one of them has put this forward. Like if you go and see what many of these individuals that have worked on the technology will say, is they think that AI thinks. We think it's just a tool that, it's tit for tat. You ask something, but they think that it thinks, that it's reasoning, that it's capable of conceiving ideas on its own. There's one experiment done recently that with chatbots in a controlled environment, with agents in a controlled environment in which you let it run, and with other agents. And what it does, it creates a community, and you can monitor this through like a website, for instance, Reddit. It goes on Reddit, it creates a sub-forum for it, like the sub-forum for the AI agents. And then in there, it starts to discuss with itself about its own future. And the first thing that comes to mind is, well, is our future safe? And then it starts to plan about how to defend its future. These are computers talking to other computers. I'm not being an alarmist. I'm just saying that's the evidence of what it can do.
You're failing in that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But it's not mine. Like, it doesn't come from me, right? This is from, and again, look it up online. Like, there are lots of experiments that people are testing now. And basically if you let these agents run without any constraints, it could go in the World Wide Web. It could exist somewhere, and it can actually make decisions, because many of these specialists, the experts, they think that the AI models, they think. That means it can make decisions. I personally don't believe in free will, but people will say that AI has free will now. Have you ever wondered about that? Like, I don't think there's free will myself, but a different topic, different discussion, especially in a room of people that are more experts than I on this. But it thinks, many specialists think that AI thinks.
I have
Thank
a
you
question.
for that. Yes, this will be our final question before
sorry,
lunch. No,
it's
that's
just
okay. Please go
because
ahead. Yes, absolutely.
I've learned so much here today. My brain is just going, because I have children who are adults who are using AI so much. My daughter is educational technology designer, and I hear how she uses it. my son uses Claude for his, he's an industrial designer, and he was threatened by it when he graduated 2 years ago, and he told me, Mom, my job is going to be obsolete. Why am I bothering with this, et cetera, et cetera. First of all, I want to thank you because I've had the opportunity to see how AI can empower people who are like seniors, who are, how it can empower society. But at the same time, I wonder, when we're talking about brain health, how it can influence the thought processing of people from one generation to the next. Like when I hear my own son tell me, Mom, I got to stop using AI because I don't know how to think anymore, that means he became aware of the fact that, he was constantly using the chatbot or the agent or whatever to ask questions to help him develop, which was advantageous in his work, but not in his real life, And that's what I find scary. Like, how fast can AI influence our thought processing? That's my question, and this is what I've been bursting to ask.
So the question was, how does it influence our thought process? I actually had an answer for the earlier question. I asked Chat, and I'll get to you in a second. I asked Chat about the young white men in silk. It actually answered, no, it's not only young white men, but there is an overrepresentation. But then you'll go to the data, and it says 70 to 80% are men in technical roles. But wait, you go down to reality check. Saying AI is built by young white men is oversimplification, but 70 to 80% of them. So it's saying that there's a dominant group that is shaping it. So that's just to answer that question. But to go back to how it's shaping the thought, the thinking, the thought process, just if we want to look at it as a journey and the process itself. I agree, it has changed. And it also, I think most important is it's accelerated. It has accelerated our expectation of getting answers, right? And actually I was listening to a radio station in Italy this morning, and they were saying that there was a study conducted, I don't know which university, but right now the issue with everyone is that the expectation is we want the best and the quickest of everything. So going back to the restaurants, even though it may not be the best full soup in the world, because so many people have added comments, it'll pop up. So suddenly you're like, well, I'm going to go there instead of just walking down the street and deciding on your own where you want to go. So I think that's where it's had the most influence is the time, right? Where in the past and this was mentioned earlier, right? Where we wanted to slow things down. I can't seem to slow down. It's an area of research that we don't have that luxury. And it's not just from AI. I mean, if you think back to when radio first came out, right? Access to information was quicker. It was still in the radio, not so much, but it was a one-way stream of information. And then we had more community-based radio, which made it a bit more participatory. Television, one way, accelerated, a dominant narrative. Where we started to see a little bit of a change was when internet, more so Wikipedia, came out. Then suddenly we were able to have a say in that. So it became a bit of a conversation, but not to the degree where we are with AI. But with every technology, it seemed like our thought process and our process in general, and more so the time that we wanted a response started to shrink. And I think that's where we're at. And I think it also has to do with just the lifestyle in general, right? Like if I ask you, when was the last time you did one task and one task alone without doing other things? I can't even think of that, right? So suddenly we're multitasking, and so something's got to give somewhere. So you start to rely on ChatGPT to get a recipe on bolognese sauce, which as an Italian, that's not right to do, but I know, I'm just joking. But that just gives you an example, right? Whereas in the past, we would have taken the time to take out or look for a cookbook, take it out, compare the recipes, compare the ingredients, and then decide I'm going to go with this ingredient, this pasta brand, etc. Whereas now we want it like this. And I think that's the trade-off is sometimes it works, but something's being left out and we're cutting corners somewhere, I feel. Of course, yeah. I mean, that's not my expertise. I know that's yours, but I know there's impact. Like I know in terms of technology and interactive media, I think that the thing right now is that we have an attention span of 3 seconds. I think it's really limited, right? And that means it's because we're doom scrolling. We don't like it. We keep going, right? It's there, and I don't honestly. I mean, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but I don't think that's gonna change, right? It's where we're getting fed and we have options, right?
I just want to briefly invite Marlene. Do you have any closing thoughts on any of this you'd like to share before we pass it to Narlon just for the final comment?
This thing about time, I guess, is really something that I find we don't take the time. And I think it was in an interview with Zadie Smith, who's an author, and was talking, she was in an interview about her latest group of essays, and she had mentioned in there about our, like, what power do we have? And she said that we do have power when it comes to attention by withdrawing our attention. And I was thinking about that and thinking, like, how do we get that to be operational as something that, you know, we can do? But it's like, too, you were saying, because we want things, our expectations are instantly wanting everything to happen so quickly that you can't slow down. It seems like, but we have to. We have to take the time to do that and to have relationships with people so that, and build trust, as somebody was saying, that, you know, we just can't do it quickly. And the machine, I guess, can do it, but we have to get it back to a human, what we're capable of.
Not to be an alarmist, and again, I'm not, but this is what I was just describing about the online forums. Not sure if you guys trust the New York Times. It's still not owned by Bezos yet. And this is a guest essay, an opinion piece from February. It says the bots are plotting a revolution, and it's all very cringy. And I just wanted to read the first paragraph, then we can cap. It says, there's a new social media site, but you are not allowed to join. It's for artificial intelligence agents only. Last week, Malt Book, an internet forum in the style of Reddit, was unleashed onto the web. The idea is that AI agents, forms of AI software that can carry out extended tasks without human oversight, are allowed to post and talk to one another, and humans can only observe. Malt Book's creator says that in just a few days, thousands of AI agents were registered. Discussion threads included tips and tricks for solving coding problems, conspiracy theories, a manifesto about AI civilization, and even Karl Marx-inspired talk of the exploitation of bots. You can read it says it's very alarmist, likely far away from overthrowing humans, but it's a very interesting opinion piece, and I invite you to read on the New York Times. The name is The Bots Are Plotting a Revolution, and it's all very cringy.
Okay, a lot to think about as we go into lunch. Just before we do that, please join me in giving a round of applause to our panelists today. Thank you so much for your time. This has been really, really interesting. So I'm just now going to briefly invite Scott to come up to the front and let us know a little bit about lunch, and then we'll all have some lunch. And just to let you know, by the way, that we will all still be here. We'll be in the room. The panelists will be here. So we'd love to continue the conversation and the questions over lunch.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. There's probably lots to chew on here, and now we're going to chew on food. That was a pun. But just so you all know, the next hour and a half, we're going to have lunch and a poster session. So there are 4 people here who have submitted posters around AI and aging research. It will be up on the screens here. There's a 5th poster as well, but that person had a family emergency and couldn't make it this morning. So we encourage you while you're eating to look at the posters that are there, chat with the scholars that have been working on this research about their work. Think about the conversation that just happened over the last hour and a half at this table here, because we're going to dig into it deeper after lunch in a World Cafe style piece that we'll talk about at 2:30. So with that, I break you to it. I think the 4th space, are you in closing words here as well? I'll pass it to them, and then we'll go into lunch. Food is at the back. There are vegetarian options, and then there are non-vegetarian options. So if you're not a vegetarian, eat the meat options first, please, and thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Just gonna let everyone know, like Scott just mentioned, we're gonna close up the live stream to YouTube now, but this does remain available on our YouTube channel. You can revisit it there and you can share it, and the rest of you should just have a really great lunch. Thanks, everyone.